Welcome to Tradiers, the Trader's Edge. You know, I'm going to tell them the story with Luis. We have a fairly new producer. I don't think he knows the level of cockiness that Bobby and I possess. And when we were just in the green room, we said, Bobby, is that your surname on your T-shirt? And Bobby just was like, yeah.
Yeah, what?
All right. So I'm Jim Iuorio. That's Bob Iaccino. This is the Trader's Edge. This is a live show. This is a fun show. A lot of you guys put in questions, and we can answer them live on air unless they're really stupid, which, by the way, we don't hold it against you. Bobby and I ask stupid questions all the time. We just won't read them on air. Okay, Bobby. Stocks got absolutely pounded yesterday. Finished week again today. September, normally bad month. Do you think this is anything serious, or still, as long as we're above the 200-day moving average, it's just normal market behavior?
So, you and I have kind of been calling for this, right? You've been talking about how you've been buying insurance in the form of puts, selling calls. I've been selling calls. Did that the last time. When the VIX spiked, I sold puts. I don't think this is the bear market sell-off. I don't. But I do think that, we're already down 5% on the NASDAQ futures as of today. So we're halfway to another correction. If you went off the futures, we had a correction in August in the NASDAQ. Down 10%. So you can have a few of these, and I think the election may have something to do with it, but I don't think it's the bear market just because of the historical characteristics of what happens during election cycles.
What did you think yesterday when we're already taking on water? There's blood in the streets, every other metaphor I can think of, and all of a sudden the DOJ comes out and says they're going to investigate the only stock that really matters, NVIDIA. Thoughts?
You're looking at a market cap weighted index, right, with the S&P, and you're looking at what before this sell-off was the largest company in the world by market cap selling off. There is no real way for the NASDAQ to recover in any real way. Maybe Brian disagrees, but without NVIDIA at least pausing, right? Yeah. You literally have to have the whole rest of the market go up and NVIDIA continue to. It's just too much of an influence on the NASDAQ. Plus, we've got that thing we've talked about before, where you've got this thing that people have money in and they don't want to dump it because they go, wow, I used to be up 3 million. Now I'm only up 1.2 million. I kind of want to see it come back. So they sell winners instead of selling what they're struggling with right now. So this is difficult to say. I do not think this is the bear market flip.
Okay. So last question before we bring on a guest who's a good guest. And most of you guys I know have tuned in to talk to him or see him. Now we're saying greater chance for 50 basis point. The whole time you are not convinced that he should be, which is not our job, whether he should be or not. The question is, will he? I actually think that he should, but it's one of two things. Either he thinks the market, the economic condition is collapsing. I don't think he thinks that. If he thinks we're considerably above the mystical neutral rate, which I do believe that's what he thinks, and he wants to usher us down to that. Which one is it to you?
Well, we wouldn't be ushering with 50 basis points. We'd be rushing down to it. Now the market has 225 basis points priced in through September. Do we really think 225 basis points of cuts are showing that the economy's okay in the view of the markets? I just don't buy that. And I'll throw one thing else in, but we'll talk to Brian about that.
Let's do that. And again, I say this quite a bit, and I say it because I mean it. You guys watch Bobby and I a lot on a lot of different shows. You might think we're full of shit, but you cannot argue that through our 25 years in media, we have made some outstanding friends for guests, and this is no exception. We're going to bring in Brian Lund, who is the author of the extremely successful Substack, The Lund Loop. If you guys don't get it, you should. It's fantastic. The last one that I read was great. We're going to talk about it right away. So here's Brian Lund. We've known each other for several years. We've never been on a show oh yeah, we have. We've been on the Spaces show recently, but that was the first time, wasn't it?
Does that really count? A Spaces?
No, it doesn't really count. This is the first time we've ever been on a show together, right?
Yeah. So we met at Stocktoberfest like 4 or 5 years ago, I think.
Right. In Coronado.
Yeah. But other than that, no, we haven't been together.
Which, by the way, I remember that evening in Coronado after the show was over with the fires going back of the Hotel Del, having drinks. That was such a cool spot, I thought. I want to go back there. Have you been back since or no?
So Howard discontinued it for a few years, and then it's actually coming back this October, and I will be there this October. So there's been like a 3 or 4 year gap But that's the whole thing about it is it's set in Coronado, which is right
Gorgeous.
at the Hotel del Coronado, and it's such a different vibe. I mean, nowadays you see all these conferences, they're at cool hip places. I'm going to Future Proof in like 2 weeks, which is right down the street here in Huntington, but it didn't used to be that way. It used to be very stodgy, and so Stocktoberfest kind of paved the way for people to, like you said, go see presentations, but then hang out and have some really interesting conversations over drinks.
No doubt about it. It's funny, Bobby, for you, the Hotel del Coronado is this really, really cool old hotel. I'm sure you know, but if some of the guests don't, but it's supposed to be one of the most haunted places in the country.
That's right.
So I had like a 6 a.m. flight back to Chicago on a Saturday morning from San Diego. And I got up at like 3:30 in the morning to make my cab. So anyway, it's supposed to be like, I was on like the 4th floor, and I think it's the 2nd or 3rd floor. They're supposed to be haunted. So I get in the elevator, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm going to the haunted floor first. So I put my bags and I start walking around the haunted floor at 4 o'clock in the morning. And then it dawned on me, maybe all the stories of ghosts are just idiots like me who are walking around looking for ghosts at 4 o'clock in the morning, because I didn't see any ghosts, but I tried. Have you heard any of those stories, Brian?
Yeah, so that's a lot of the lore at the Hotel Del. It's haunted, it's scary, but even scarier, they got bought out by an M&A firm, right, or a venture capital firm. They came and just gutted the whole inside of the hotel, and I guess they've redone it top to bottom. So I'll be interested to see what it looks like when we get down there this October.
Yeah, I have been there. I lived in Los Angeles, unfortunately, for about 4 years.
I hear you.
So I have been down that way. And every time I went down that way, it re-energized my love of California, because LA will sap that quickly. So what the hell?
What?
First comment we get is about a school shooting during the first day of school.
Who's that from?
It's from Demos Capital. School shooting during the first day of school.
Jeez, let's start this on a light note.
Yeah, let's make sure we do that.
We care. We do
care.
I don't know.
I don't care right now, to be honest. I mean, I don't care about the kids.
So I'm born and raised in Huntington Beach, which is Orange County, right? And there's a big difference between Orange County and Los Angeles. People that aren't from this area, they don't understand, but it's huge, right?
Huge.
So whenever I go down the coast, I almost invariably go south because I want to go through Newport, Laguna, maybe San Diego. But this last Monday, or I guess day before yesterday, right? What's today? Wednesday. Yeah. I was getting over COVID. So I've had COVID all last week and I was quarantining. And so I finally told my wife, I'm getting in the car and I'm driving for like 3 hours. And this time I went north, which I very rarely do. And I ended up in Malibu, and I forgot how awesome Malibu is. Really? I hate LA County, but Malibu is really beautiful.
Malibu is beautiful, but it's filled with some of the worst people from Los Angeles, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So if anybody's watched from Los Angeles, I mean every word of it. So I want to ask
you people. You people are wonderful. It's your neighbor who's not watching the show.
Right.
Again, I lived in Pacific Palisades for about 4 years, and the stories from there. I don't know. Anyway, I want to ask you about something we were talking about as we came into the show, and it was about the probability of the Fed being aggressive with rate cuts and what kind of a signal that would send to the market, if any. Do you see anything sort of behind the curtain there with how quickly they go, how often they go, how deep into 2025 they go with rate cuts?
So you're asking the absolute wrong guy that question, because I try to pay no attention whatsoever to macro. Like, I'm a technician, and I believe that most of what I need to know is going to be in price and price action. So I'm interested in how the market reacts, whatever they do at the next decision. But as far as, will they or won't they, there's way smarter people out there that know that, and I would defer to them.
Okay, so I'll add on to that if I could, because one of the ways I started out my career doing solely technical analysis, and an early business partner I'm still partners with, a guy by the name of Mike Arnold. If you ask him what he thinks of the non-farm payrolls number or the Fed, his answer is the same every time. I don't care. He goes, I only care what happens with price. And then when I started doing media, which Jim and I are both now exiled from,
proudly
exiled from, they would ask me things that I wouldn't necessarily know about. So they'd say something like, we want to talk about, what you think Amazon earnings are going to look like. And I would go to a chart and I'd see what Amazon looked like. And then my opinion of what the earnings were going to look like came off of what direction I thought the chart was pointing. and I would just basically backfill it, right? Oh, Amazon, it's going to be awful for Amazon. They're probably going to go down to whatever price it was at the time. So to back into this question, what is price action showing you about short, medium term in equities and in risk assets in general? And I'll answer what I think of what the opinion of the market of the Fed is based off that.
Yeah. So, I mean, after last week, we have basically a lower high in place in the four indexes that I watch. Yesterday was a really ugly day. I think, I look at that chart of the IWM, and I've been doing, I did my first trade in 1985, and I can't remember such a broken looking chart, like, breaking out of a 2-year base so definitively, and then consolidating, looking like it's going to go higher, and then absolutely falling apart, breaking back into that base and failing, and then crawling back out of the base again. So that tells me, I mean, the other indexes don't look exactly like that, but it tells me there's just a lot of indecision. And I think you talked a little bit about it. I think maybe in the I think the market is really more worried about the presidential election than people think. And I try to keep politics out of my investing. I don't believe the market is better under any type of party, but I can't deny the fact that if the Democrats get into office and they have any sort of edge in Congress, we're going to be in a higher tax environment. We're going to be in a higher regulatory environment. We're going to be in a higher spending environment. And I don't think the market has come to terms with that yet.
So so as far as the politics thing bring up, and I know that I don't want to harp on this too much because Bobby and I always describe our trading style as 70% technical analysis, 30% fundamental, usually just to buttress our technical opinion in some way or to be able to express it eloquently.
Yeah, tailwind. You want a good fundamental tailwind that supports your technical. Yeah,
exactly, and that's what we search for. So now we look at this election too, and I look at what you just said about the Democrats. Absolutely, spend too much, tax too much, regulate too much. Now you look at Donald Trump, spends too much, cut regulation, probably cut taxes, which can be inflationary too as well. So that might keep rates higher. I actually believe that rates will stay at a higher level if Donald Trump is president. Does that seem reasonable to you?
Well, I mean, look, you can get to the argument of it used to be that the Conservative Party, the Republican Party was, they didn't spend, right? And now we know that they spend.
Hell yeah.
But I feel, having watched the Biden administration inject so much money, what I think is so much unneeded money into the economy and basically create the inflationary, circumstances that we've been in, I don't see how that's going to be any better under Kamala Harris administration. And I think the other thing that people are maybe not factoring in is, for my whole lifetime, okay, we have a Democrat in, we have a Republican, but there's still some center of gravity, right? It's a right-leaning Republican, a left-leaning Democrat. Kamala Harris is, I mean, she's literally the most progressive, almost to Marxist. And again, this isn't a opinion. This is the way it is, right?
Yeah, that's
right.
Fact,
so,
right?
So I don't think we've seen this type of politician. This would be like if we had some super austerity Republican that we've never seen, right? So that's why I think the market's really not sure exactly what it wants to do here.
Right. And even when I hear her talk about, the Marxist part of it, which by the way, we are not expressing an opinion at all. This is based on the speeches she's given before. To call her a socialist is completely reasonable. There's no question. Now, when she says she wants the federal government to build 3 million houses, what the hell does that even mean? They took $8 billion to build charging stations, and they built 7 charging stations over the last 3.5 years. The notion that they're going to start building housing is literally one of the most communist things I've ever heard. And it will, all it does is disrupt the housing market. That's my little rant. Now, but back to markets real quick, is you mentioned the Russell being confused. When you look at the S&P, let's start with the S&P before the NASDAQ. Do you see the same kind of confusion? And by the way, your investment money, do you use technical analysis for that too, or you just have your trading accounts that you trade?
Yeah. So this is really important because I always forget when we're talking on these things that sometimes there's civilians that are tuning in, and you should all before anyone puts a dime of risk capital in terms of trading, you should have, your retirement accounts funded, your 401ks, your IRAs, your 529s. I have all that stuff, right? That's the foundation, and that stuff I don't even mess with, right? That is dollar cost averaging and money manager. I use technical analysis specifically for my short-term trading, right? So for me, ideally, swing trading is the best. The market doesn't always give you the opportunity to swing trade, but I try to stay away from the super short term and try to lean towards 3 days to 3 weeks. And for that, I always use technical analysis.
And do you use options or just the underlying?
I don't use options as much as I should. I did an option trade that was really out of character for me recently. I did it in June. I bought coin and I wrote some December 240 calls against it because it was just a massive premium. Like I was getting almost $60 for it. And so, that's the last big option thing I've done. And in fact, I actually bought those options back yesterday, even though the chart of coin looks like crap. Yeah. But, sliced 30% off my cost basis. But I don't use options as much as I should. I'm not sure why.
Okay, so last question for it, because I want to give Bobby the next question. I wanted to say something and get your opinion on it too. So for the last 2 weeks, I had been getting my ass handed to me. So the last 2 days, all I've been doing is trading, on a 2-3 hour time frame, micro FX. It's literally not even enough. Barely. Today I made enough to pay for lunch and parking, but I just wanted to get myself back into the swing. And I thought once I started getting crushed, my emotions were running a little too high and I was starting to see things that weren't there. Do you like that thought theory?
So for me personally, so I am ADHD and I'm not hip, trendy, new ADHD. I'm old school
ADHD.
Diagnosed, right? ADHD. Many, many years of cognitive therapy to try to get a handle on my ADHD. I try to do everything I can to tune out noise, and fast is noise to me. I always tell my subscribers when I'm scalping NQ, that's a bad sign, right? Because it usually means that the market is, either there's no trend or it's going haywire, and it's not good for me emotionally. So I try to, when things are going crazy, I try to step back, and I'm totally willing to quote unquote miss things where there's other people. I was on a JC show this morning, and Kenny, the Hit the Bid guy, was on there, and he was talking about all these things he wants to try to do today because of the recent volatility. That's the opposite of me. I'd rather just, sit back, maybe even turn the monitors off and go to the beach.
So just real quick, I don't know if you guys know who Eric Weinstein is.
Sure. Brett Weinstein's brother,
Brett
right?
Weinstein. Yeah. Brett Weinstein's brother.
Yeah. Brett's brother. It used to be the other way around. If you asked who Brett was, they'd say Eric Weinstein.
Right.
It's kind of flipped. He was on Chris Williamson's podcast a couple days ago, and he pointed out something I didn't know. That thing that Vice President Harris says that can see the future unburdened by what has been, or see what can be unburdened by what he said. That's Marx. Literally,
I read that too.
Marx.
Well, I mean, her father was, I believe, a Marxist professor, right?
Yep. Indeed.
Okay, so there you go.
Yeah, quacks like a duck. Right.
It walks like a duck. Quacks like a duck.
Right. Exactly.
Back to
by the way, Brett Weinstein is great. He's the only guy right now. He has an op-ed, I think, in the Times. He's the only guy that's saying out loud that a hostage deal in Gaza is a trap. Nobody else will say that, right? But he's got now you can agree or disagree, but he's the only guy that's got the balls to actually take that tact. And I respect that intellectual honesty.
And no doubt.
So one of our viewers threw something up, and it was actually very much what I was going to ask you about, Brian. Widge said that I found that the less I stare at my computer, the happier and more productive I get. You talked about swing trading. Jim and I were on the trading floor together. I left in 2004. Jim stayed. And when I left, that's when I moved to California, right? About a year and a half after that. Moved to California and had to retrain myself. And one of the things that I noticed was backing up and letting everybody else trade the little moves was much more effective. Shrinking position sizes down and widening expectations for stops and targets was the only thing that worked when I didn't have the stimulus of the trading floor anymore. And Jimmy can confirm this, you got to a point where you heard a certain sound. And at the CME, unlike the board of trade, everything was sold. Whether you were buying, it was sold, and whether you were selling, it was sold.
Yeah.
Right? Your hands were different, but the words was the same. But at CME, it was buy them or sold. and that had different pitches, right? And
Yeah.
it took probably a year and a half, 2 years to get that out of my system to where without hearing that, I had no idea what was going on. So what do you tell people from a perspective, especially again, we have people in here who are struggling to get to that point where at least the two of you are, but I'd like to be where you're actually comfortable with your trading. What's the biggest piece of advice you give people from a perspective of, okay, what do you do first?
Well, so this is going to sound like a flip answer, but it's honest. I tell everybody that wants to get involved in trading, they should go to therapy. And the reason I do is because the market has some amazing ability to distill out of us our deepest insecurities, right? Our deepest self-destructive tendencies. Like, I think being successful in the market has much more to do with whether, your mom loved you or not, or you have a, good relationship with, yourself than it does anything else. So, and I don't say therapy, like I'm pro therapy. Anti-therapy is a crutch, right? I think you go to therapy to make progress so that you don't have to go to therapy. But I think there's a lot of people that come into the markets and they have an idea of what trading, what investing is about, right? And the worst thing about trading and investing is you don't know what you don't know when you first come into it. And so in my generation, people would go watch a movie like Wall Street and they would think, yeah, trading's about swinging for the fences and big risk and whatever. And they would come into the market with that attitude. But what they didn't realize is that inside of them, that was the antithesis of their emotional makeup, right? So they've got these two things that are working against each other. When you go to therapy, you work through and you figure out, oh, I think I'm a slash and burn trader, but I'm really more set up to be a buy and hold investor, right? And so I think getting those things in tune, how you actually execute against your emotional makeup is probably it's the foundational thing for any success in the market.
Can I add a quick thing? Bobby and I had
no, you cannot. Sorry, Jim. It's
right. Bobby and I, on our other show, we had a therapist, life coach on, and he started kind of psychoanalyzing me, which I think was Bob's intent to begin with. 100%. And I said, my question to him was that, I've been on a trading floor for almost 38 years, and I believe what's happened to my brain is I need like constant stimulus. And when I'm off the trading floor, wherever I am, I'm getting antsy and I need to leave. And he goes, no. And I go, what do you mean no? And he goes like, tell me this. Did you grow up in a household where perhaps there was someone who was abusive, maybe your dad, a drunk? And I had a brother who was a drug addict, drug salesman, abusive as shit. And he's like, you were on edge all the time and always on guard. And you were attracted to the trading floor because you needed that to feel at home. And I was like, shut up, you witch. this conversation is over. It was
throwing bones on the table and things like that.
Right, exactly. I felt like getting all red like I am now, like, holy shit. I was telling my sister that because we were kind of the brunt as children. We were always like in cahoots together, how to not get beat up. It was like bump, 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 bump. And we survived pretty good. And I like my personality. I wouldn't change a thing, but it was pretty interesting. Bobby?
Yeah, it's interesting that bringing that guy on was really cool because you started talking about things. I did briefly go to therapy, and it was never mind why, but I was there for about 6 weeks. And I remember the very first session, I'm sitting in there and I went like this. And the guy's like, so why are you here? And I'm like, I know what you're doing. He goes, what am I doing? You're trying to get me to talk. So I talk through my own problems and I solve them. But that ain't going to work because I know what my problems are. What are they? My problem is 45 minutes later, I stopped talking. And I'm like, you fucker. I was so upset. I feel like I'd been had. But
yeah.
Therapy's
powerful if you use it correctly, right? Like, so I've been in therapy with my wife, right? For couples therapy at certain points in our marriage. I have friends that have gone. If you go into therapy as a couple and your only goal is to tell the therapist what the other person's doing wrong, you're doing it wrong, right? So there's all different things that you need to do when you're in therapy to make sure you're getting the most out of it. And even getting in therapy, a lot of people don't do that.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say, how would you relate what the market is versus therapy? Is the market therapy or is the market the drug you're trying to control? Like I know people who are alcoholics who can just have one drink and they're just functioning alcoholics, high functioning alcoholics. And I know other guys who are alcoholics who they just need to stay away. And I know that when I used to teach trading 10 years ago, I used to tell people everyone can be a successful trader on some level. You just need to know if you're that person who's putting in a tiny position once a month, rebalancing every quarter, or you're the person who's trading every 30 minutes from like 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then going to the beach. So where do you see trading fitting in that little theory?
Well, it's obviously different with everybody. I think it's you have to ask yourself, what are you trying to get out of trading? And I know it sounds like a stupid question because I want to make money, right? But a lot of people are in trading to get validation. They're in it to get the juice, the action, right? And so again, this kind of goes with my whole thing about tuning out macroeconomics and not really caring about the Fed. Like I need to keep, I'm in a constant process of bringing myself back on point. Always, right? It's just like, you don't go to the gym and work out once and then you're done, right? So I'm always bringing myself back on point, and I'm reminding myself that I'm not here to discuss theories. I'm not here to I'm here to make money, and I'm here to make money for a reason, right? I make money to have a better life for myself, for my family, right? To be financially sound, to have freedom, to support my community, to support causes I like, right? I'm not just making money for the sake of it. So I think if people can really answer that question, and I think that's the problem, right? We're so good at self-deceiving. And that's why I think that therapy helps them to answer the question, well, why am I doing this trading? What do I want to get out of it? And then tailoring their actions so that they're going towards that goal.
Yeah, you know what it is for me, Bobby, and I'm the first to admit it. 5'8" guy, in a big man's world playing basketball. I always wanted to prove I was smarter than everybody or tougher.
You're only
than
5'8"? I thought you were taller than that, Jim.
No, I'm 5'8".
Shorter than that.
I am not shorter than that. It depends on how much yoga I've done in the last couple of weeks. I'm 5'8" if I've done a lot.
So I've heard I've never traded it institutionally. I'm a pure retail trader, but I've heard that height is a big advantage. Like I've talked to Jeff. I don't know if you have Jeff Carter on here, sure, right? But other like pit traders that Jeff he's like one of the few people that's taller than me. So is that true? Is height an advantage?
And I paid like $250 to get a pair of shoes, specially outfitted, and they had soles that were this big. I'm not joking. And then the CME, it became a big deal. They're like, he can't use those. And, somebody's going to get hurt. I'm like, bullshit, you uncoordinated old man. How about we play a one-on-one, me in the shoes and you? And if I beat you in a one-on-one, then we think that they're safe enough to wear in the pit. But anyway, it went on for about 2 years, but then they finally did make them illegal. But they helped quite a bit. And I took voice lessons too. Yeah.
I was coming off the trading floor once with two guys taller than Jeff. We both know Jeff.
Wow.
Yeah. And they were taller than Jeff. And I got on the elevator in between the two. And one guy was a starting center for DePaul University for years. And the other guy played football. He was an offensive lineman, I believe, at Wisconsin. So you're talking about a guy who was 6'11", another guy who was 6'9".
Wow.
And I'm standing between them. I'm looking up. I'm like, we're not the same species. We're simply not. We come from completely different DNA. We're not the same. I mean, they were just giants. But
Mike Lang, by the way, Bobby, real quick. Mike Lang played football for Penn State, never played basketball for Penn State, and the Bulls drafted him just for his body. You know what I mean? Because he was 6'11" and this lad. He never played, but the Bulls, that's a true story. But anyway, yeah.
So anyway, there was like in my institutional clients, guys were more my height, which I'm 5'9". And guys were more my height in the institutions, right? I'm taller than you. We've proven that. When you go into like,
I feel you guys have stood back to back. I feel that happening.
It's coming.
No, we're never going to stand back to back. We're just going to argue.
It's going to argue about it. But no, you go into like a hedge fund or a bank office and stuff. Those guys were like around our height, but the guys in the pit were absolute giants.
Huge.
Yeah. So Jeff told me that he was one of the tallest people, but he said there were other guys that were taller than him when they stood on their wallets.
We got to get Jeff on here one of these days.
You haven't had Jeff on?
You have not had Jeff on.
He's a good guy. I'm friendly with him. I talk to him all the time. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah, he's a good guy. Yeah.
So let me go right into current market. So you look at price action. To the level that you're comfortable talking about it, what do you like right now? What don't you? And I don't care what it falls in. You want to be commodities. You want it to be sectors. You want it to be individual names, indexes. What do you like and what do you not like?
You're forcing me to put my glasses on. Thanks so much.
I hate that too. I do it. Yeah.
I don't wear them on
What's
camera.
that?
I don't wear them on camera.
So I have to wear them to look at the charts. So there's a lot of different ways I like to position myself. Like I said, sometimes sometimes I'm scalping, but I'd rather not. I'd rather be long-term. And one of the long-term things that I like to follow, it's basically the 4 stages of a stock's life. It's something that Stan Weinstein wrote about, and you've seen maybe Brian Shannon expand upon it. And it's the accumulation stage, which is stage 1, right? It's the markup stage, which is stage 2, when a stock starts to move like this. Then you've got the decline and distribute. I think distribution's top when you're distributing, and then decline like this. So I'm looking always at stocks for that pattern on a macro basis. And if I look at PayPal right now, PayPal looks to me like it has just come out of stage 1 and might be starting stage 2. It was in a big base that maybe started in October of 23. It's consolidating after breaking out. So I like the look of that for a longer term play. Another one I like is Palantir. If you looked at either on a daily or a weekly, every technician sees a Head and Shoulders or a cup and handle everywhere, right? So I'm not going to say this is a cup and handle, because I know this doesn't conform to the O'Neill, but it's got that look, right? It's got that, post IPO, fell off, and it's kind of rounded. I like Zillow Group is another one that looks like it might be getting ready to come out of that stage 1, go into stage 2. Stage 2 is the stage that can go from like 6 to 24 months. And that's when you get the most explosive growth in a stock. So those are just a few names from a longer term standpoint. Short term, there's nothing that looks good right now after yesterday's action. And today's action was the worst action you could have as a follow-up to yesterday's action. Like, I would have rather had us tank and close at the lows, or push and then reverse and go high up into yesterday's bar, but we just did this and then kind of nothing.
Lost. Right. And I agree with you on that too. But does that then mean on the broader indexes, you gun to your head, bearish over bullish right now? And I'm not saying that it's a trade thesis yet, but bearish over bullish. That's fair.
So right now, what time frame are we talking?
I don't know, the next month.
I'd say, yeah, I would say people forget that the market can also just go sideways, right? It can do a lot of nothing. So I would say bearish to sideways.
Okay. That seems fair to me. Do you look at gold, silver, copper, anything that, the stuff that we trade on the futures markets, or no? Not really.
So I look at GLD, which is the worst proxy, because I know that
but it's a trading vehicle, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I look at that. I look at GDX, the miners, and I look at SLV, just because I put it in my daily review, because I know I have some older subscribers that like gold and silver. I don't look at it myself. I like gold coins and silver coins. I'm a numismatic dork from way back, but not the actual commodity.
Do you have, Bobby and I both have physical gold too, and guard dogs and guns. Do you have physical gold as well? Yeah. And by the way,
maybe Jim, I might.
As I said before, if you can get past the dogs, you'll wish you had. So I have no problem with people knowing
the dogs and the Glock, and it's all yours. So
exactly, it's all yours if you can take it. Yeah.
I might have some St. Gaudens coins around.
Good.
I'm not a big bullion fan. I like coins that have some numismatic value.
That's cool too, Bob.
Yeah. So just for the purposes of doing this, because he does such good work on this kind of stuff, Mike Singleton from Invictus Research, Brian, if you've never talked to him, you should. He did a comprehensive sort of back test of the season, not a back test, but he covered the seasonality of election years, right? And he took it all the way back to, I think, 1998. And the S&P 500 average
1998, you said?
Yeah.
That's not that far back.
It's not that far. No, I agree. But I think he was kind of going to where he felt we got this sort of bifurcation in parties where it became more important. And that's one of the things about elections that bugs me the most is, it's when President Biden stepped down, he said, I think it's best for the party in the country. I kind of wish that would have been reversed. When you read his note, it said the party in the country. It's like, what do you give a shit what's best for the party right now?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some data, some proprietary data that goes back to 1960. And what it's done is it's weighted the different components of the government, right? So the House of Representatives, Senate, and the presidency. And it's assigned them a certain weighting, whether they were Democrat or Republican, and then it figured out when they were all Republican or all Democrat. And the numbers I saw was that the average return under Democrats was 15.8% and under Republicans was 15.3%. So statistically no difference there. So again, that's another reason why I don't usually care about who's in the White House or in politics.
Yeah, well, here's what I think is interesting. So the average return in election years in September for the S&P 500 is minus 0.4%, and in October is minus 1.7%. And then November and December are both positive, 1.3 and 1.4 respectively. And then you look at the T-stat for those, and they're not significant. In other words, they could be random. T-stat is a measure of how far from randomness this particular type of result is.
Okay.
So if it's less negative than -2 or more positive than +2, it's statistically significant. It's basically what that means. So I look at those as being, okay, fine. I mean, September and October are usually negative months, regardless of election. And November, December tend to be positive, regardless of election. But then, and I talked about this with Jimmy earlier, the Russell is kind of amazing because, I want to throw one more thing out on that. The percent positive for September is only 56% of the time. October is 44% of the time. Then November 67% and December is 89%. So again, but they could be random. But then when you look at the Russell, the T-stat is 4.55. Remember, +2 or more means it's not likely to be random, right? And the Russell performance, November plus 2.5% average, December 4.7%. And the percent positive for December is 100%. So in every single election year in December, the Russell's been positive. Again, going back to 1998. So what is that? 5, 6 elections? Not that many. And the T-stat being 4.55%. So I'm taking that and I'm starting to do sort of a similar thing to what Brian and you do, Jimmy, where I'm going to keep an eye on the Russell chart. Because if I get and I generally do this anyway, I feel like, and you guys can jump on me if I'm nuts, but I feel like the job of a trader is to put on every good trade you see, period. Don't find a reason to not put on a trade, and don't find a reason to put on excess risk in a particular trade. Like, I personally don't believe in confluence of factors, meaning you should risk more. I don't. Because even if you have 3 different indicators, all giving you a 55 or 60% probability, that still doesn't tell you when they're all going to line up to that 40% of the time where they're wrong, right? And that's going to be the one trade that wipes you out for the next few months and you can actually do trades. So what do you guys think of that approach? I'm going to keep, this is something that I do where Jimmy said 70-30, and I agree with that, 70% technical. The thing that switched with me, Brian, years ago, was I find my ideas in the fundamentals, and then I let the chart either veto it
100%
or approve it. How do you feel
100%.
about that?
Yeah, 100%. So who doesn't love a narrative, right? Everybody loves a good narrative, right? And I've got my head handed to me.
Narrative trading. I love that.
Right. I've gotten my head handed to me most when I followed a narrative that diverged from technicals, right? So I love to find a great story, but it has to be the final validation has to be the technicals, because it's Brian Shannon, who you may or may not have had on, only price pays, right? And by the time I'm going to find out that those fundamentals are no longer good or have changed, price is already way changed and I'm probably underwater. So I totally agree with that approach.
So the Brian Shannon books, is the one about VWAP, is that which one is his best book, do you think?
So
Brian Shannon, by the way, we love you and we're about to sell some books for you because we have no problem with that.
So this is Brian's first book, Technical Analysis Using Multiple Time Frames, right?
Yeah.
And this one is the one where he goes into kind of expands on that Stan Weinstein 4 stages. And then this is his latest, which is the anchored VWAP.
That's what I'm talking about.
It's not WAP, it's WAP, okay? And I hear people say VWAP all the time.
Where you go with that?
That's a solid joke, by the way. And by the way, we noticed that you wore a black T-shirt to be on with us, and we consider that a respect. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Bob's wearing one with his last name. I thought I'd wear one with my last name on it.
Genius, right?
So what I like about, I sometimes will throw a VWAP on a longer term chart. I don't use it as much as I should. I know I should learn more about it. A lot of my subscribers use it. But the thing about VWAP that really makes sense to me is so you have all these technical indicators and they're basically all derivations of time and volume and price, right? There's no magic. There's just how they represent it. The thing that makes so much sense about VWAP is it takes into consideration the mechanics of the market in terms of institutions, right? So if you're an institution and you've got to get into a position, you have to have X amount of shares or what. You guys know, you've been on the floor, right? You can't just put it all in at one time. You got to work that thing over time. And I think that makes so much sense that the VWAP is going to, that's that target that you're hitting, you're trying to go for, right? You don't want to be too far below it or too far above it. That makes sense to me. That rings a lot of bells. So I think I should probably be paying more attention to VWAP for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start that book on the ride home just because traffic's going to be miserably going from downtown. I may start that book. That's something I want to look into too, because I've never traded off of VWAP before. Bobby, have you?
No. When I initially heard of it, I read the definition and I said, this sounds like DeMark a little bit, right? Where DeMark would have these volume ranges and these volume levels, and those support and resistance mattered more. I found over the years with technical analysis that when you find something that works, less is more, and adding something in sometimes is just a confirming study rather than anything else. So I have nothing bad to say about VWAP. Like you said, I know a lot of guys that trade off of it and they swear by it. But I seem to have built-in filters that help me with those sort of vacuum situations anyway. And I don't know if I'm right about that.
I mean, again, I'm trying to explain the way I understand it. But so my understanding is that if you're putting an order in, right, if you're a big institution and say, we want to buy XYZ stock, and you want to, as the trader, you want to be getting into that stock for your client below what the VWAP was. You don't want to have the price to be above the VWAP over what term, period. And I believe there's incentives around that, right? Like if you get it. So that to me as a capitalist makes sense too, right? So there's a lot of things that go, okay, I see where they're going on this thing. And what Brian does is he anchored, the big thing about Brian's is not just the VWAP, but the anchored VWAP, right? Where do you start the VWAP at? So there's different ways to anchor. You anchor it at the beginning of the day. If you're doing an intraday trade, you do it at the beginning of the quarter, but like he'll also anchor it to events. So let's say you have an event where like NVIDIA gaps down big on earnings. So there's a big gap on the chart. That's an anchor point, right? Because there will be people that will be stuck below that level, right? Underwater, right? There'll be shorts that will be profitable and it will have to work itself out over time. So there's just a lot of stuff in there that I think you'd find interesting. Both of you would find interesting.
I'm literally going to start on it today. So before, we have probably about 10 minutes left. So tell me this, when you break it up to sectors sometimes too, I assume, right? In trade, whether it be the ETF for the particular sectors, are you right now, we've established that we're all kind of sideways to weakness. I'm fine on the downside because, as Bobby said before, every time we've had a good move upward, I buy puts. So I have a lot of puts that over the last 2 days have activated. But if you look at certain things like, our utilities, our staples, are things that are generally defensive looking better than things that are generally risk, like small caps and technicals. Do you have any opinion on that?
I can only say that anecdotally. I mean, I know like Walmart hit all-time highs recently. I think Clorox did. Like I hear, this is again being part of the trading community, Twitter. I hear stuff from people that know that stuff. Right. I don't really pay a lot of attention to that because I'm never going to trade Clorox. I'm never going to trade Walmart. Like they just don't move the way I need them to move. So that's more of removing noise from my process. So anecdotally, I hear that, but I haven't really looked at it.
Bobby, do you have an opinion on that? What do you think?
No, I would say the same thing. I mean, it's not something I've looked at. And I sort of along that line, Tim McLean, who watches this show pretty regularly, put in a question. Do any of you guys use the McClellan oscillator? Now, I don't.
I've looked at it. I don't know that I truly understand it. I'll let Brian answer it, but it's kind of like, it's almost like Bollinger Bands-ish, right, Brian, or no?
Advanced decline. It evaluates the balance between advancing and declining stocks. And again, I found, so here's something, and I want you guys to comment on this too, if you could, Brian. Yep. I found that the more stuff I put in, I'm filtering out more winning trades and losing trades. And so the McClellan oscillator is something I tried to use for a while. And then I noticed that I saved myself, like, I'm just making these numbers up, 3 losses and also avoided 7 wins. Just because it probably was not a good time to put in that trade, but my other indicators and theories worked regardless of whether the breath was good or bad. So,
Yeah, I mean, look, like most technical traders, I went through all the indicators, right? I was in love with MACD at one point. I love it with RSI, fast, slow, oscillators, blah, 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 blah. I've stripped it all out to the point where, again, after doing this for 37 years, a lot of stuff is just, I can look at a chart, and I'm not saying that I know what's going to happen, but you get a feel for it, right? So I'm paying attention to a few things. I'm paying attention to 4 different moving averages, right? I use the 8, the 21, the 50, and the 200. That represents the very short
So
term.
funny, 'cause that's exactly what Mike Arnold uses as well,
Yep,
by the
same
way.
as me.
Okay, yeah, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, so that's the very short term, the intermediate term, and the long term. I use support and resistance levels because I think price has memory, and then I use pattern recognition. Right, there's certain, like, I'm always looking for contraction before expansion. Right, I love a good base. Right, I love a good consolidation area because that also allows me to define my risk. Right, I want to know where I'm wrong. So I throw volume in a little bit, although over the last 5-10 years, to me, volume has been less. It doesn't correlate as much as it used to. So I just try to keep it really simple.
You had sent Palantir before. Is there any way to get a longer term chart of Palantir up? Because there's something that he mentioned that I really like too. And I looked at it at a longer term chart, and you saw a kind of a base, and then it's kind of consolidating at what seems to be a significant point. That's what you were talking about before, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically it's consolidating kind of below all the old highs.
Yeah,
Back
exactly.
after
So
an IPO.
and as soon as it pushes through there, that flips the switch to buy it, correct?
So if you look at Kava, right? Kava did the same thing. Kava, initially was hot. It hit its post IPO peak, then it dropped off, spent a long time making that big rounding, type of bottom, and then it's gone to the moon since. So, once you get past that overhead supply at post IPO, either, at the IPO or post IPO high, it's blue sky.
Oh yeah, I see exactly what you're talking about. Wow, that's
well,
wild.
if you guys talk just randomly for a minute, I'm trying to put that up.
Yeah, because either Palantir or Kava. And by the way, like, I was about to ask what Kava does, and I remembered then we are technical traders. I don't care what Kava does.
So this is a great point though. So Kava is a fast casual, like, Mediterranean restaurant.
Oh, I do know Kava. Yeah. Hey.
And so I went to Kava. So I've traded the stock. I had it for a while. I sold it way too early, but I went to they finally opened one out here in Costa Mesa, like one town over. Went there, horrible, right? Hated it, right? I can get better Mediterranean food at the local Greek families, restaurant right down the street. I'd rather go there, patronize them. But that has nothing to do with my opinion on the stock, right? Like, I keep those two things totally separate. So I can hate the product and love the stock, and vice versa, right? There's some like, I love my Peloton, but the stock is a dog.
Yeah, right. So just for the chain restaurant thing, I own a restaurant, a pub, an old mafia pub restaurant in Palatine, Illinois. So I am a big fan.
A Como Inn type of thing. Is that what it's?
What it is?
Is it like a Como Inn?
It's a little like the Como Inn used to be, but it's not as mob feeling, like city mobsters with suits and hats and cigars. Right. It was more like the northwest suburbs were a big bootlegging corollary. So it was more like the relaxed country mobsters, but a very similar thing. So this is Palantir?
Yep.
Oh, I love this chart. So can you walk us through, Brian?
Yeah. So, I mean, look at this. So look at after it bottomed right there. You're moving your cursor around there. Yeah. Right where it crosses whatever that moving average is right there. Like,
that's 200.
So you're just seeing constructive action over time. I mean, it's just moving up, pulling back, moving up, pulling back, but going higher and higher, putting in higher lows, it just looks great. And here's what I really like about it. See that big gap down?
Yep.
Right. So that was an earnings gap down. Look how fast it erased that gap. Okay. That is signal right there. That is telling you, because the market, so Palantir's, they do their earnings. Here's all the current information. Market doesn't like it and then puts it right back in there. What's going to happen? They're going to have another earnings 2 days later. Like, all the information is out for a while, and the market has said, weak hands sold it, strong hands bid it right back up and took it right up to new highs. I love that sort of action.
And now that it's trading lower over the last couple of weeks, you start to look for a spot that it comes into a buying zone, correct?
Yeah. So if you can you zoom in a little bit more on the recent action? Is that possible?
Sure.
So that little red hammer there, which is about 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So
Yes,
that was a great little spot. And then look what it did today, right? It held roughly in that area. So if I'm looking to get into Palantir, I already have a position, longer term position, but I'm getting in above that today's high, and maybe the tail of today is your stop, depending on how aggressive you are, what your risk profile is.
And that lines up with these highs here, which gives it about even a stronger support level. That sort of
it does roughly line up with those, right?
there.
Yeah. So is the I with the vowel thing, is that an Italian last name? Is that how it works?
I know a lot of Italians with I last names, right? Bobby, is it really common? Iaccino. Yeah,
You're Southern, right, Jim?
Yeah, Southern Napolitano.
Yeah.
We call ourselves Napolitano, but really the other side of the Amalfi Coast up into the mountains. It's a beautiful little town.
Yeah, Southern.
So you guys both have Italian heritage? Is that?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm the child of immigrants, so I actually spoke dialect Italian before I spoke English, which I think is why I've lost my Chicago accent, because I spent so much time losing my Italian accent that when I left Chicago, I'm like, I'm not going to talk like that anymore. I lost it.
What's crazy? What's crazy is we were talking about Stocktoberfest, which is down at Coronado, right? So if you go to San Diego has a Little Italy, and it is a legit Little Italy. Like it's not like a touristy. You go through Little Italy in San Diego and you hear old Italian people talking. And the way I understand it is like, because it was a fishing, obviously a lot of fishing there, a lot of Italian immigrants actually went there and, put down roots, but it's a cool little area down there.
Well, when you think of the city of San Francisco, if you take away the influx of the Asian community over the last 50 years, do you think of that as a heavily Italian city?
It's funny. I know North Beach is very Italian, right? But I don't. It's funny. I don't think.
Yeah, I always did. Maybe because I was a baseball fan and like the DiMaggios were from there and they grew up in the Italian. Louis Zamperini, the unbroken runner. They all grew up in the Italian area of San Francisco. Same thing. Like they like their fish. The Southern Italians go to a place where they can do their fishing thing. So San Diego, I love. San Diego was one of my first loves. If it wasn't
Bank of America, were Italian as well.
What's that?
That's right.
Bank of America was founded by Italian immigrants.
Wasn't there some video going around Twitter recently where the guy was trying to figure out where BlackRock started, and he went all the way back to Bank of America and figured out it was.
I want to throw something up by Tim again real quick, because I'm not sure what he means by this, but I think he's trolling us a little bit. Would you buy a used car from the CEO of Palantir? I want to touch on something really quick.
I got an opinion on that.
There it is. I want to touch on something really quick. One of the things that drove me crazy for years about Kramer on the TMZ of financial media, CNBC, was him talking about, he's a great CEO. This is a great CEO. I'm like, you have never run a company. Now, maybe now he has, right? But how do you know who's a good CEO and who's a bad CEO, especially if you just go by stock price? Because the guys at Enron were fantastic CEOs for a little while.
Until they weren't.
Right. So I've never understood that. Like, to me, when somebody says bad CEO, good CEO, just because they succeeded in another role as a CEO. And again, most of us in our industry judge that by stock price. So would you buy a used car from the CEO of Palantir?
Yeah. So I was just going to say that, like, you're a good CEO if your stock price goes up. I mean, CEO is just like product. Like, I don't care. I don't have to like the CEO. I just have to like what their stock does. I like the CEO of Palantir because he's kind of an a-hole, right? But like a type of a-hole,
But that means Jimmy would like him too.
He'd like him too, yeah.
And I get the sense like he just says what's on his mind, which I know is not maybe the best thing to do in a public company, but like I'm so First Amendment, right? I'm so freedom of speech that whenever someone, especially when they're in a dicey situation, they could be paid to be very like this, then they speak their mind. I respect that a lot.
All right, good. Well, let's close it on that. There's been a ton of.
You and I come from the area where the American Nazi Party was allowed. Sorry, the Illinois Nazi Party was allowed to march.
Skokie, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, Skokie, Illinois, and they were defended by the ACLU.
And by that fire.org, Pete, those people who we've done some business with, we've talked to a lot too. They defended him as well too, which I would defend as well. Which, by the way, I've always, even as a child, I kind of suspect when you see those kind of things that are they really Nazis, or just a bunch of dicks who just want to get a reaction out of as many people as they see? That seems more likely to me, but I don't know shit.
They were defended by the ACLU and by a lot of Jewish ACLU lawyers, right? So I mean, how much do you have to believe in the First Amendment to fight for the rights of someone that would see you exterminated if they had their way, right?
That makes me happy and proud to be an American when I see that. Freedom of speech is about defending speech that you hate. Everyone defends speech that they like.
Hey, I had brain surgery in 1997, emergency brain surgery to remove a tumor that had ruptured. My surgeon was a dick. I'm glad he was a good brain surgeon.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's cut it. I got to get out of here. Thank you. It's Brian Lund. Tell them where they can find you. And if you're not subscribing to the Lund Loop, you're a fool. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me for stock market stuff, thelundloop.com. And if you don't care about the markets and you just like interesting stories, you can find me the Anecdote on Substack. That's
the last one. The COVID one was very good, by the way. I really did enjoy that.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. I was going to actually start the show by trying to blame you and have some moral superiority that you got COVID last week. But as soon as you do that, then you had COVID the next day. So I'm not saying that. Yes, yeah.
The irony gods will smite you down for that, Jim.
They always do. Yes.
Anyway, when I was 15, know where to get a T-shirt with my name on it, just let me know.
If you want a shirt with Bobby's, DM us and we'll tell you where to get a shirt with Bobby's name on it. Listen, I gotta go. This is Tradiers, the Trader's Edge. I'm Jim Iuorio. That's Bob Iaccino. That's Brian Lund with the Lund Loop. By the way, none of this works without the support from you guys, and we are humbled and appreciate it so much. Bobby and I both were in traditional media. I'm trying not to say mainstream media anymore. For 20, 25 years apiece, we found that you cannot give your honest opinions because you have producers who are leaning on you for opinion. You have sponsors who are leaning on you for opinion. It's a bullshit system. The only way we're going to get people's honest opinions is if we break away from that and create it in forums like this. And none of that works without the support we get from you guys. And we get a ton of it. And we're very appreciative. This is Tradiers, the Trader's Edge.
Capitalize on stock market uncertainty this coming election. When most see disaster in the headlines, informed traders see dollar signs. Elite traders have embraced market fear for decades, and now you can too. Join us at our exclusive Fall Tradier Virtual Summit, sponsored by SIBO, on Wednesday, September 18th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Claim your seat at summit.tradier.com before registration closes.
You know how the financial world goes. Here comes the buzzkill. Please make sure to take some time to read this boring disclaimer. We will owe you one.